Hi, I'm Garrett a Wisconsin land agent with High Point Land Company, and we're back doing our High Point series. I'm with Mr. Bill Winke and Wisconsin land specialist Eric Halverson. And today's topic we're going to talk about with you is greens versus grains. And so what we're going to kind of touch base here is talking about like your neighborhood and where you would see value in putting in a green food plot versus the grain type.
Yeah, so let me hear your thoughts on that, you guys, because you're dealing with a lot of properties. I've dealt with a number of them, but they've all been ones that either I've consulted on or ones that I've owned. But you've probably seen hundreds of farms. So I mean, what have you seen that works, and what tips can you offer us?
Well, I think kind of every area is unique. You go from northern Wisconsin where you don't have much agricultural land, and a small clover plot might be king up there because that's all they need to attract deer. You kind of move south into agricultural country, and it just seems like, what are the neighbors planting? There's a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans going in. Are you putting in brassicas, something different? I'm trying to figure out what the neighbors are putting in. What can I do different? And it's just a lot of trial and error for me.
So you would like to find something different,
Yeah, you know.
rather than matching what they're growing.
Yeah, because there's
Yeah.
corn everywhere. I don't want 3 acres of standing corn. I do once the corn's picked on and all the neighbors,
Yeah,
obviously.
And
But
it's December.
yeah, but I mean, for the rest of the season, I'm looking at maybe a brassica plot or something that's going to be a little different. Maybe some late planted soybeans that stay green into the beginning of bow season for us. So I'm always trying to tweak stuff, trying to play around with something new, and you never really know. It's just kind of a trial and error thing every year because you don't know until you try something, and I'm always trying to plant something different.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for both of you guys then that I've ran into. How does the size of the plot impact what you planted?
Well, for sure, if I'm under an acre, I don't even mess around with like soybeans and corn. And I kind of try to pair them where all my food plots are kind of set up the same. So if I do a brassica, I might do a late soybean on the other half, and I kind of try to keep it consistent all over the farm. I don't want the deer hammer in this spot of the farm, and then 3 weeks later they're over here. I try to keep it pretty consistent, so if I got a buck coming in, he's not changing plots, changing his routine on me, and I can kind of try and keep a pattern on him until until the rut kicks in, and then it's just fair game for everybody.
Yeah, I think that also helps to keep his range smaller.
Yes.
Because if his food sources change all the time, he's having to adjust to that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can keep a consistent food source in front of him, I feel like you can glue him to a spot better. You never have the option, of course, of holding these deer because they have a mind of their own, and fences don't mean anything to them. Roads, creeks, all that stuff that means something to us, they don't mean anything to a deer.
Right.
We think, oh, he's not going to go over there because that's whatever. Well, it doesn't mean anything.
No.
So you're always trying to figure out, how do I maintain that deer in an area where I can hunt him? And I think that's a good point that you're making about the consistency of the food.
Mm-hmm.
Where it doesn't only have like a seasonal attraction here and then something else over there. So let's talk about that some more. I mean, I think that's a really good topic.
Yeah, and it's funny because you think you have those deer pattern, and then you might go out one night looking for deer, and that buck's 3/4 mile down the road in someone else's bean field or something, and you never do keep them in where you want them. I mean, they have a mind of their own, but you can try your best, and that's why keeping things consistent. If you have a bedding area tucked by a food source, you're trying to keep that deer there, maybe at a water hole or something, but I try to keep all my food plots pretty consistent. I plant the same thing, and if I change something, I kind of change it up on the whole farm and try something new that year. So,
What do you do for rotations? Because that's the one thing that I've always struggled with is you can't run clover forever and you can't run brassicas forever. You can do a bean, corn, that works, but how do you rotate on your smaller plots?
well, a lot of our corn we just let the farmer plant, and then for me, I don't really put in corn because all my neighbors have corn, so I just will pay the farmer X amount an acre. He leaves it standing through rifle hunting, and it's more used as a late season plot for us. I rotate my beans a lot. If I do like a smaller plot where they kind of browse it down, I usually plant it around the 4th of July so it stays green for bow hunting, and then I'll top dress my brassicas and my winter rye right into that, and then I usually have brassicas, and then that winter rye is coming up. And then in the spring, it makes for some great turkey hunt because it's usually the first thing to come green. I'd say I usually will do like a bean field and then a brassica. and then I'll probably switch to clover for a couple years, and then I'll till it back up into like a bean, something where I can control the weeds, and then I'll flip into brassicas for a year or two. Yeah.
You know, the key, of course, there's some really fundamental stuff, and you know, Garrett, I know you know that too. I mean, you've got to have food, and it's got to be in the right places, but exactly what that is, maybe that formula is not quite as critical.
Yeah, just trying to keep it, centralized as much as possible. If your farm, depending on your layout, and then also like how it relates to wind direction. I know as well as Eric, we don't ever put in a food plot for the sake of putting in a food plot.
So excuse me, to touch on the same things that Eric was talking about, do you have a pet rotation plan for your plots?
Yeah, pretty much. It's very similar to what Eric does. I'll do like beans on one half of a plot. If it's, like he said, if it's big enough. Anything under 3 acres, I won't do put any beans in, just for the sake of the amount of deer that we have. There wouldn't be nothing left. And then I do come in and put in brassica or like a winter rye to add tonnage to that plot, just to keep them there.
So how do you put the overseed? Do you broadcast it, or do you drill it in?
Yeah, I broadcast it. Yep, with a seeder.
And I've done it with the no-till drill into beans, and people think that it would kill the beans, but it really doesn't. and you get a lot quicker turnaround because you're putting the seed into the moist ground. Whereas if you broadcast it, you're waiting on the rains, and you might have to have 2 generations of rain, before that'll go. But in the Midwest whitetail days, we used to call them poor man plots, because you could find a way to plant something without a whole bunch of equipment. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Eric, for touching on this topic. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more great content.